Guys, earlier today when I was at work, I was going through Instagram and I was on an account that I follow. It's called BarstoolNewsNet. I have no idea why Barstool Sports has a news account, but I follow it because, believe it or not, it actually does some pretty funny commentary on both the right and the left, right? So it'll make a meme that'll make fun of Obama, of course, because they're pandering to a very conservative, very elitist audience for the Barstool Sports audience. But then they'll also criticize Donald Trump. They'll also make a meme where they have Donald Trump saying some dumb crap, and they'll criticize that too. And it's funny, and they do it in a very funny way, so that's why I follow them. I made the mistake of going into the comments section on a post about President Obama's tan suit, and I'll show the post right here. It's you all remember, of course. It's the tan suit that made Fox News go absolutely nuts for like a month because, oh my god, he's wearing a tan suit. He's destroying America by not wearing a black or blue suit because it's nonsense, of course. It's nonsense. But the caption is, Barack Obama's tan suit still may be the best thing he did while he was in office. Hashtag Obama Day. Obviously, a little bit of a snipe at Obama, and I don't mind that because I'm very critical of Obama myself, but still a pretty lazy snipe at Obama. So the top comment on this post was, actually, Obamacare is the best thing he ever did while he was in office. That's very debatable. I personally disagree with that because I think Obamacare was a unnecessary half measure. He had a supermajority in the Senate, right? And he had a Democratic-controlled House. So, as an incredibly popular first-term president, you're not even going to get a public option, let alone single payer, let alone Medicare for all. You're not going to do that because you're beholden to corporate donors. You're not even going to get a public option when other leading members of your party are campaigning for that, right? So that's besides the point. I get into this and I see a guy, he says, his name is Dutch LQ7. This is this dude's account. I don't know if you can see. You can kind of see. It's this dude. It's definitely not him, but it's this dude draped in an American flag. He's wearing an American flag. When I see that image, I just think snowflake. I'm so triggered by people that don't agree with me that I'm going to shroud myself in the American flag. Woo! So, and it's got a dumb quote by Churchill. He probably doesn't know anything about Churchill's policies. And we'll get into that. We'll get into how absolutely nothing this guy, Dutch LQ7, knows about policy, political ideology, anything to do with politics. He knows nothing. Absolutely nothing. So, Dutch LQ7 responds to the guy that's talking about Obamacare, and he says, "Remember when he more than doubled the national debt from $9 trillion to $20 trillion and could never get the GDP even close to 7%. Okay, first of all, the GDP is a terrible indicator of how the economy is doing for regular people. It's a good indicator of how it's doing for corporations and the wealthy because the GDP is measuring macroeconomic growth for the entire country. So, cool. I don't care about GDP. Sorry if you do. I don't. So, here he is lamenting, no, Obama didn't have the right amount of GDP growth. By the way, he's not even right. He's not even right on that point. Now, President Trump has been bragging recently about the fact that he was able to get the GDP to 4.1% growth over the last quarter, which is admittedly good, but it's not unusual, and it's not even the best growth quarter that we've had in the past 10 years. Several times under President Obama, the GDP did grow by over 4%. I believe it even grew by over 5% at least once under his term. But that's besides the point. Like I said, I don't care. So my response to that was, remember when conservative Jesus, Ronald Reagan, quadrupled the debt because of a dumbass Cold War, #MAGA. Threw the #MAGA in there to just to troll him a little bit because he's an idiot and he doesn't know what he's talking about, but we'll see that. And then I commented again, also to this guy. I said, also, it's totally fine to cut taxes for the rich and spend trillions of dollars on illegal wars because the debt doesn't matter for those things. Because that's a very relevant point, I think. If we're going to be talking about the debt and the deficit, we're going to be talking about, increasing the debt, we have to talk about things like that. No one ever questions, how are we going to pay for the Iraq War, which cost at least $1 trillion, not to mention the hundreds of thousands of people it killed. No one ever asks how we're going to pay for that, right? So I bring this up, of course, and he says, Dutch LQ, he replies back to me. And this is where the rabbit hole begins. This is where both of us jump down this rabbit hole of, it's just bad. So he says, yeah, you're right, but he tripled it. False. And the, quote, dumbass Cold War, you mean defeating the USSR, making the world safer by eliminating the threat of a nuclear holocaust and making the world safer for democracy. Oh, please. Oh, please. Get out of here with that. That's... I address it in my next comment, but he goes on. In another comment, at SamYork32, my taxes went down, as I'm sure yours did too, and the president in power is not the only one who spent trillions on illegal war. Although given the limited time he's been president, Trump hasn't spent trillions on any war yet. Fine, but that's not who I was talking about. I didn't mention President Trump. I don't know why he's jumping to that conclusion, assuming I'm attacking President Trump. I wasn't. I was actually attacking all the other presidents that have done these illegal offensive wars against countries that didn't attack us, that spent trillions of dollars and killed hundreds of thousands of people. So, besides the point, right? So, come down, and I replied to this fool, and I said, we'll go back to the Cold War point, where he's like, oh, we had to protect democracy. And my reply to that was, I just lost it. Give me a sec here. Instagram is the worst platform for this, because if you swipe out of it, you lose everything. Okay, so my reply to the Cold War point was, no. I mean, competing with the USSR in a dumbass geopolitical chess game that led to the deaths of millions around the world. And his reply to that was, and how many more millions born and unborn would have suffered and died under the tyrannical rule of the communists? How many untold millions or billions of people were able to live and enjoy liberty in South Korea and Europe and other places around the world because we defeated the Russians? This guy has the most simplistic view of foreign policy of the last 100 years of history and of politics that it just boggles my mind. And he's out here, he's trying to argue with me about stuff like this, when he obviously does not know what he's talking about. South Korea, you're going to bring up South Korea right now. Right now. The Korean War never ended. To this day, we are carrying out aggressive military operations. We have simulated the destruction of North Korea several times. We do offensive military drills on the border of North Korea, in South Korea, all the time, constantly. Only just recently, President Trump, and I give him credit for this, this is good that he said this. President Trump said that he was going to stop doing things like that. Do I believe him? maybe. I don't know if I can, because Mike Pence went to the Congress and he met with Republican leaders in Congress the next day. He was like, it's okay, we're still going to do those offensive military drills on the Korean border. So I don't know if I can trust him on that, but I give him credit for actually saying to Kim Jong-un that he was going to stop those military drills. So I don't know what he's talking about there. I think he's totally full of it. I don't know how he comes to that conclusion. And so I responded to his ridiculous point about the tax plan. And I said, I pointed out the fact that 83% of the benefits of Trump's tax plan go to the top 2% of earners, because that's just true. I didn't even point out the fact that within the next 10 years, any benefits for the middle class and people below the 2%, they phase out. They have a sunset provision. But the tax cuts for corporations and the ultra-rich, those are 100% permanent. They were made permanent. And there was no way to phase them out. So it's just nonsense. Absolute nonsense. But I didn't even bring that up because I don't think he would have understood. Because here we go. He tries to get into tax policy. And he even further shows how little he understands about politics. So he says, the Tax Policy Foundation states the top 1% of earners, in parentheses, incomes in excess of $615,000, which is misleading, which is very misleading because that's not even the very, very top. I'm talking about the absolute top, like the billionaire class. So he's talking about these people. He says those people are paying nearly half, 45.7% of individual income taxes for tax year 2014. And I have to stop and laugh here because that is just utter nonsense. Because that is what you call a nominal tax rate. That's what it says on the books. That's not an effective tax rate. The effective tax rate is actually much lower because people in the very top of the income bracket can put their money in overseas bank accounts in places in the Caribbean, in Switzerland, wherever it may be, places with much lower tax numbers. So they don't actually pay 50% of their income. That's absolute nonsense. I don't know how he believes this, but he has to, because that coincides with his political ideology, which is a very far right-wing ideology where he believes that it's perfectly okay for the top 1.1% of all people in the U.S. to control more wealth than the bottom half. He's okay with that. He's totally okay with that because somehow Jeff Bezos having over $100 billion is because he 100% earned it. It's not because he doesn't pay his workers a living wage when he has all that money. It's because he actually worked that much harder and he deserves to have that much more money. This guy believes that. I wholeheartedly think that guy believes exactly what I just said. So he's not even done. He's not even done with this particular comment. It gets better after this, but this one comment isn't even done yet. He goes on. You sure do like stealing money from people. You must be a socialist. You certainly sound like one. We go to the straw manning. Now, this gets me into an interesting discussion, right? And this gets me into hot water, I believe, with people I consider friends, people I talk to all the time about politics. I don't consider myself a socialist. I consider myself a democratic socialist or a social democrat. The terms are interchangeable now. That means I don't believe in the collective ownership of the means of production. I think in theory that would be a great thing, but I'm a democratic socialist for a theoretical reason and also for a pragmatic reason. More so the pragmatic reason. Like, I'm okay with the theoretical side of socialism, but my thing is that the American political spectrum is so far skewed to the right that I don't think it would be possible to implement a full socialist political system in the United States, not even in my lifetime. I don't think that's possible. And perhaps that's cynical. Perhaps it's very cynical of me to say. I'm sure some of you will have disagreements with me on that. That's fine. I think that's a totally open, and I'm open to having my mind changed on that. But that's where I am. I believe in a system more like Scandinavia, where they still have a base capitalist system. They still have private business. They just have a very strong social safety net where they guarantee decent basic health care to all of their people. They guarantee college education. They have a living wage. They have very good wages. In a place like Australia, I believe their minimum wage is $17, and they have very high productivity. They have very good labor numbers because a minimum wage works. A living wage works. So that's the kind of thing I believe in. That's the kind of thing I think can be implemented in the United States in our lifetimes, and that's what I'm personally fighting for. But that's too hard for Dutch LQ7 to understand. So I go into it and I say, while the nominal tax rate might be something like that, I tend to think it's lower. The effective tax rate for the top earners is much lower, around 15%. That's the truth. You can find that number anywhere. It's especially true for massive corporations. In addition, there is a similar disparity in corporate tax rates, meaning the right-wing talking point about the U.S. having the highest corporate tax rate is complete nonsense. I am not in favor of stealing money from people. That is a ridiculous straw man of my point. When half the country makes $30,000 a year or less, while the top 1% controls about 50% of all the wealth and income, I support making those individuals pay their fair share. I think that's a very fair point to make. My political views can be described as social democracy or democratic socialism, which is not the same as outright socialism. I actually got a like on that comment, so go me. There's another free thinker on this BarstoolNewsNet discussion here. Dutch LQ7 isn't done with me, though. He's not. He says, so what's your opinion of fair share? Because that can be anything. By the way, as of last August, the U.S. has the highest corporate tax rate in the world. The top corporate tax rate in the U.S., a combination of federal and state and local taxes, is nearly 39% this year. That's way above most other OECD nations. False. Absolutely false, because we'll get into that. So he goes on and he says, so you can try and fool yourself, but anyway, any word you put in front of socialist is nonsense. You're for the taking of people's income. Wrong, you're. Lovely. You're for the taking of people's income to be redistributed to other people. Yes. The goal of socialism is communism. Okay, so not only did he disregard my point about nominal and actual tax rates, effective tax rates, he goes and strawmans my argument, and he essentially calls me a communist. I just explained to you guys, I'm not even a socialist, and here he is even strawmanning me further and calling me a communist. Just such a basic misunderstanding of political ideology, and it's so frustrating to see people just not care enough to know what they're talking about. He says, wake up, read a history book or two, and educate yourself on the evils of socialism. It's not all your college professor told you it was. That's beautiful. That's just great. I'm supposed to listen to you over my college professors? Yeah, that's a good idea. So I reply to him, you completely disregarded my point about nominal versus effective tax rates, true, which is understandable because you probably have no idea how economics works. I say that because you very clearly have no clue what the difference is between political ideologies, and you'd rather smear me as a socialist, which I don't even think is a bad thing. It's not even a smear. It's just a perfectly logical and valid political stance to have. Just not in the very far right-wing skewed political spectrum of the U.S. Um, even though I told you I'm not, I go on. And I'll gladly take the words of my college professors over people like you on Instagram and conservative morons like Tucker Carlson and Ben Shapiro. You're the one who needs to read a book or two. May I recommend Chomsky or Hofstadter? I liked that one. That one made me happy. And I go on because here's what those books would do. Hofstadter would explain the trends in American political ideologies that would have led to the stance that he has now, and the anti-intellectualism and the shunning of, like, he in his comment he says not to believe my college professors. That means he needs to read Hofstadter. He needs to understand these basic principles. And Chomsky would break down the policies and the policy substance of what's going on in the U.S. over the past 30, 40 years, especially right now. He is absolutely on point, and he has been for so long. So this guy needs to read Chomsky. So he replies to me again. He's not done with me. He just can't stop. You can call it whatever you like, but it's socialism. Democratic socialism is just socialism that you voted to put in place. Wrong. It's the redistribution of wealth to other people. Do your research on socialism in Sweden and Finland. It's not what you'd think. I'm not saying it's socialism, you ding-dong. Even the head of Denmark has had to state that they are a capitalist market economy. I know. That's what democratic socialism is. It's also really hard to compare Sweden or Finland with homogenous populations of 5 to 10 million people with America, a melting pot of different races and cultures, and a population of 350 million people. Well, the only reason that's true is because we have an uber-capitalist system and a government built on institutionalized inequality. We literally had slavery. We literally had Jim Crow laws. So don't grandstand to me about how Finland and Sweden are different than the United States. We don't know. We have no idea. We have some idea, actually. That's not entirely fair to say. We have programs like Social Security and Medicare, and they are the most popular policies in the entire country. So, not sure where you're going for there. My response was, son, you are perhaps the most dense person I have ever debated. Possibly. Democratic socialism is capitalism. It just adds a strong social safety net through healthcare, education, fair wages, no illegal wars, etc. Socialism is the collective ownership of the means of production, which I do not support. Here I am breaking down the This is important for later. Here I am breaking down the difference between socialism and democratic socialism. Albeit in a very, very basic way, but I did my best. You'll ignore me and call me a socialist again, though, because you're stuck in the Fox News echo chamber and you don't know what you're talking about. So he comes back and he says, also, if I've read Chomsky, I think he meant I have, but he said if. He was clearly rage typing. He was like, oh, I gotta pwn this libtard. Oh, Chomsky's a communist. That's what he says. Also, I have read Chomsky, and I have found him to be a communist and anti-American. I have no use for him. Dummy! Clearly we have different views, and we will not agree while arguing over Instagram posts. You are clearly an inadequate human being that relies on others to make it through life. Thanks, pal. Appreciate that. I'd advise you to read Dennis Prager, Jordan Peterson, or Ludwig von Moses. I might read some Peterson because I know he's very popular right now among people that like to call themselves classical liberals or something like that. Just to know what his exact positions are. Um, I don't plan on getting around to that anytime soon because I'd rather read and listen to people that I know have it right, like Chomsky. But I am interested in reading Peterson, so I'll give him that. He says, so quick to throw Fox News into the game, as I'm sure you rely on CNN or MSNBC. There he goes. He thinks CNN and MSNBC are communist or socialist or whatever the hell. That's a discussion for another day. But you guys know how ridiculous that is. Funny that you call yourself a democratic socialist, but you don't want to be labeled as a socialist. That's true because they're different. They're different things. So, don't know what to tell you there. You have an identity crisis. Do your thinking for yourself and try to clear your mind and come up with some thoughts on your own. Yeah, why don't you practice what you preach there, pal? Because you clearly don't know what you're talking about. My last response was, yeah, no, we're not going to agree, but I hate CNN and MSNBC as much as you. You know, I don't have to read my last response. I'm going to read the last thing he said because it's actually just insane. Because, you know, I'm not even going to go into his last comment because I think it's just more of the same. It's more of the same that he's been trying to come up with the whole conversation, and it's just he keeps saying the same thing. I could tell him as many times as I wanted, I'm not a socialist, I'm a democratic socialist. I literally explained the policy positions that I support. I broke down the difference between socialism and democratic socialism. And it didn't matter at all. At all. Because this guy, he doesn't know what political ideologies are. He doesn't know how economic systems work. And he basically just doesn't know what he's talking about at all. I don't know where he gets his information. I doubt he's been actually reading things. He's probably just been watching stuff on YouTube. Maybe that's not fair to say because I don't know, but it's my assumption. And yeah, that's the state of our politics right now. Our system is heavily skewed to the right. People don't know what they're talking about. And I am a fool that follows down the rabbit hole of arguing politics on BarstoolNewsNet because I have nothing better to do because I'm a politics nerd. What else am I going to do? You know? Okay. I think that's enough for now. I'd love to know what you guys think about this whole discussion I had with this guy. Was it worth it? Should I continue to do stuff like this just to get the word out about socialism, democratic socialism? Or should I just keep to myself and not be bothered by stuff like this? Also, let me know if you guys would like to see more discussion from me on stuff like this. I personally really like doing stuff like this. So let me know what you guys think, and thanks for watching.